sustainability of networks is so important. And this is all what we learned in this period, that companies like KFC, Pizza Hut, McDonald's, Starbucks, the likes of them, they were able to thrive in this.
Sure.
And they were able to do that, what I call continue to hold or even draw even more trust from the consumers, versus a lot of independent operators. They were not able to do that. And I echo his piece that franchise businesses are first to rebound. Why? If you're running your own equity business, you're running your own stores, you're in a big pain. You have so much assets, so many things to manage. Your manpower has dispelled. But if you're running a franchise network, you are entrepreneur-led business. You have people who are looking after the business, so it's easy to come. And network plays a very big role in that. And I feel that franchise businesses would be able to survive this much better than independent-owned businesses. And I personally feel, this is on India. I'm sure this is more happening in every part of the world. But India, every adversity, and I can share with you in 2008 also, franchising goes up big time. Why? Because job losses, smaller cities, people don't have opportunities, diversification of people running whatever they were running, now they would shift into that. All that things actually encourage franchising. And just to share with you, we have reached out in last 60 days about 200,000 new entrepreneurs in these last 60 days. This has never happened in our history. You've been to our shows, and you've seen that we have done big shows, but we never in this history we would have seen such a large reach out. While the conversions would take their own life cycle, but in a mindset viewpoint, everybody's thinking that what is the next thing in their life. So that's all is happening. So certainly would like to pick your mind, which are the sectors you think has positive impact, which are the sectors which you think are...
We'll have some of those leads if you don't need them, by the way. That's a large number.
This is also another one. Half of the lead, because Indian numbers have changed, so the everything, these COVID numbers are making a lot of things, and you are in a better and so you're better place. A lot of people are even not even asking franchise now in India if they can get a franchise in Canada. So when they want to...
Yeah. Well, actually, I work with a lovely lady who's an immigration consultant. So if anyone needs any help, just give me a shout. Okay.
It is a big opportunity. Indians always, especially north of India, loves to they live for giving one day in Canada. So one day they just want to migrate there.
Look, you know what? I mean, there are thriving Indian communities in Canada all over the country. And I'll tell you a funny story. I remember I spoke with a guy in Ontario, and I'll say his name. His surname is Mr. Patel, because there's a lot of Patels in Canada. And I was asking about his background, about his experience, and when he came to Canada. And he goes, well, I emigrated to Ontario in 1985 or something like that. And I said, oh, so, which part of India did you come from? And he goes, no. I emigrated from British Columbia to Ontario. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, I've been there since the 50s. And now I emigrated to Ontario. I was like, okay. So there's this built-in... anyway, I work with a lot of different nationalities, but certainly a lot of people from the subcontinent. That is for sure. Can you hear me properly, by the way? Because you're just a little bit low. That's all. Now, in terms of industries, right now it's been about which industries are dying rather than which ones are thriving. Because I was talking with a venture capital private equity style company in the US who are out there like vultures looking for companies that are struggling. They're looking for opportunities. But when I looked at their portfolio of companies, they have everything that's wrong right now, right? So they had like hairdressers, massage companies, everything that was all hands-on. And I'm like, oh my God, your business must be dying. And he goes, it's not doing so well. And yet they didn't want to touch the restaurant industry. And I'm like, well, right now, the QSR, the fast casual market is doing very well. But I think what's happened, what I'd like to get out the way is, I think a lot of the weaker brands are starting to show. So, you can be big, but your business can be built on a house of cards. In the franchise industry, you can sell a lot of franchises, but if you don't have the proper infrastructure, if you don't have the right tools in place and the mechanisms in place and the processes and the systems. And also, to be fair, if you don't have the right if you don't have the right financing and capital in place, it can quickly go badly wrong for some people, because you've suddenly got franchisees who can't pay their rent. You've got franchisees who don't want to pay the royalties. You've got products that nobody wants, or you've got a service style that nobody is comfortable with. Just this week here, McDonald's just started operating takeout, so you can actually go inside and get your food. But for a short time, it was a nightmare, because when they introduced a couple of years ago all the touch screens inside the restaurants, so they did away with the counter service. It's all touch screen. So that suddenly has become a bad thing, right? So high touch points have become a nightmare for them. So they've had to close that section of their business and think about how they're going to redo this. So I think they've managed to do that. But then after that, they have to instill confidence. So there are some brands that have suffered. You're looking at personal fitness, for example, big gyms, which up till this point, up until March, have been on a tremendous growth curve, amazing growth curve. Like everything health, everything lifestyle have been really, really great. So if those brands have managed to come out the other side healthy in some way, I think they will thrive. There's a built-up demand right now for health-related products and services, for sure, me included. I can't wait to go to the gym. I don't want to run around the streets myself. I want to go to the gym and do it, right? So there's a big built-up demand. So that has to be controlled carefully when things reopen fully. Senior care, I'm working with the senior care brand right now, where, a shocking statistic for Canada and for the US and for the UK and other countries is that more than 80% of all the people that have died from coronavirus have been in long-term care homes and nursing homes and senior homes. So that's not a nice thing to say. So you can imagine how their industry is in a flux when the majority of senior care franchises are in-home care or at-home care. And they even go into nursing homes and care homes and provide additional care. Now that's gone out the window, so they haven't been able to do that. But the care demand is there, because there's an extra demand for certain types of care services. So industries are in a little bit of flux, and they're trying and see how they're going to pivot around all the challenges that we're facing. But on a daily basis, the market's opening up slowly. So, with restrictions, people are going to travel more, they're going to do more, they're going to buy more, they're going to eat more, they're going to sell more. But there's such a pent-up demand that as soon as here in Ontario, the restaurants have opened up all their outside areas. So they can go onto the terraces and the patios and have drinks and food and stuff. And there's a huge demand. So everyone's piling in, which hopefully doesn't cause any further problems. But, the growth areas now have become more technology-based. They've become more online stores. In the traditional, and this is something really that's very big in India for sure, is the kids' education, the tutoring and supplemental education. Here, it's a big business too. But what's happening is that's changing. That's becoming more coding and companies like Code Ninjas. They've taken over from Kumon. So there are some brands that are sort of slipping because they just offer a very traditional method of supplemental education. Other people are coming in and teaching. Well, we're going to teach you how to program computers, and we're going to teach 7-year-olds how to do that. So that side of it, and now the government's on top of that, so they're getting funding to get all that done. So those are the industries I think that are primed for growth. There's a lot of opportunity in the market for companies who want to start their franchises, especially in the food business. In terms of lease takeovers and real estate. There's a lot of opportunity coming up, and I really hope that people have the appetite, to really get on board and grow, because the market can really bounce back from where we are right now.
So is it not a good time, because markets would shrink and markets would probably see a share shift? When you look at small businesses, historically, franchising and small businesses were the two comparisons we were making. So it's going to be far more difficult for small businesses to survive these tough times versus franchise businesses, for two basic reasons. One, franchise businesses have more accustomed to innovation, whether it's technology, whether it's access to funds, whether it's kind of pivoting the whole business model. For example, education was something which we saw surge on one side when it came to technology-led education. And education, which was not having technology backup, suffered big time, right? So is that something which which would probably boost franchising in these times when people would have conversion opportunities, we would have
Absolutely, Sasha. Absolutely. The conversion opportunity for the smaller independent owned businesses, it's happening already. And there are a few franchise companies who are actively out there making it happen. So they're out there looking for those opportunities. They're looking for smaller chains that are independent to absorb into their systems. Now, yes, franchise companies probably come out stronger because they've been able to use their strength to get through this, as long as they've been fair to their franchisees. So there is a caveat there. They've had to do it because in the face of social media through all of this too, anyone puts a foot wrong, boom, everyone's talking about it. So that's another thing to be very careful. The reputation management right now is unbelievable, because you just can't do anything wrong. And then on top of that, of course, you've got this worldwide surge in anti-racism. You've got so many different causes that are now start off small and end up worldwide very, very quickly. So companies have to be on top of that. So the PR message, their corporate social responsibility messages have to be very strong. And franchise companies have the depth to be able to create those and develop those and live those through their brands. If last year somebody in Starbucks said something to the wrong person, or they didn't serve somebody of a different nationality, all of a sudden they shut down all the restaurants and retrain everybody, and they come out with their social media campaigns and they're able to do that. So that's exactly the same when it comes to restaurants, for example, in the coronavirus era, where they're able to get the message across about how clean they are, they're, exactly what they're doing, the sanitization processes and what it means to customers, all of those things. So they're able to get the message out there that small little independent guy just can't do. They just can't do it. They can try through social media on a local level, but they can't do it beyond that. So that's where the strength of, I've always believed in that strength of franchising to be a cooperative system where, as long as you've got the right leadership and you've got the franchisees who are all bought into the the values of that company, they can really thrive in this area. But it is technology driven now. Technology is the driving factor behind so many of the larger companies, and that's going to leave some people behind. But India is a country of small business owners, big time. I mean, it's traditionally been known as that. But every country is to some degree. What's a small business? In Canada, a large franchise company has 100 locations. In America, 100 locations is what you would have in one city. In India, that might be tiny. But every country is a little bit different. So the average franchisor that is mature in Canada only has about 75 locations, roughly, and they're only adding 4 or 5 a year, something like that, 6 a year. So there's a lot of players, and everyone's just fighting for the same franchisee. But in some areas, companies are thriving. But there is a big conversion opportunity almost in every sector. Into the franchise model. But I've always believed that to convert somebody, you need at least 3 or 4 very compelling reasons for someone to do that. And I've done it because I've worked with franchise companies who are trying to convert smaller independent businesses into their franchise, and they have to have good reasons to do it. Obviously, it's financial led. So, can I make more money? Can I spend less time on the business? Can I get more customers in? Can I have better negotiating platform with landlords, for example? If a brand can't say that to somebody who's a small business, it's never going to work out. In the long run, it's never going to work out, and they might as well just buy them and give them a little bit of money and convert their business. So yeah, conversion's there, but it's got to be for the right reasons. And yeah, it's there's definitely a huge opportunity in Canada as much as anywhere else.
And I've seen in conversion, the only, you rightly said, the biggest pain comes in really that who you convert, So if there is a, problem in the business itself and you convert that and you're not able to bring the fresh capital to turn around that business, it can become a complex issue even more. I mean, I've seen companies have done, conversion in the just the sake of growth or being opportunist, and they've not been able to make sense out of that. Rather, they've actually had negatively impacted their businesses. And so conversion is a great opportunity only and when you can show a dollar plus effect in the business you're converting.
Absolutely.
This can happen because your supply chain is more complementing, your brand brings in extra customers or things of that nature. And this would also mean that there is a fresh capital deployed. Who's deploying that capital? Most of the time, somebody who's getting converted as a small business is run out of capital. So he doesn't have money, right?
Yeah.
Expectation is, I'm happy to join you, but I don't tell you to put more money, right? So this can be a good strategy for companies which come with very strategic capital being allocated to not only convert, but empower and bring some fresh cash in the system to rejuvenate these businesses. And then only I think this conversion franchising. Conversion franchising is a great opportunity, but sometimes small, or a very opportunist approach towards it can actually be a counterfeit on that.
So, and I should follow up on this. I mean, is location and asset, which is available on distress, is an opportunity?
Look, we've always said, right, that location is everything. In a retail environment, for example, in a storefront, in a food restaurant, unless you're a destination brand where people come to you, I don't know. If you're a cheesecake factory, people come to you, right? So you can locate almost anywhere you want, but they choose high volume, large footfall malls to be associated with to keep the business going all day. But in terms of locations, some of the best locations are now a hindrance, or they've become a hindrance. Like, for example, people pay a premium to be in the high-end malls, shopping malls everywhere. In Dubai, oh my God, I remember how much key money people had to pay, and I'm sure it's the same in India. It's been the same here. People have made a lot of money through leasing, but all of a sudden, when the mall shut down, what do? And then the landlords are, they're getting edgy. In Canada, the government has been extraordinarily supportive in most cases, where they came up with a rent scheme where they were only, they basically were funding 50% of all rent, and they still are right now. So the tenant has to put up 25%, the landlord's got to take a hit of 25%, and the government's funding 50% up to a certain amount especially for retail locations. And for a lot of people, it's a lifeline because, I have a personal opinion about that. I think if you're the mall and you're not allowed to open, then I don't think you should be charging your rent because you're not able to offer the service that the tenant has signed up for. But premium mall locations have always been exactly that. They've been premium. The people are paying their money. It's expensive, but they rely on footfall. That disappears. It suddenly is a hindrance around the neck of the lessee and obviously the landlord too. So on the conversion side, the same thing. Location is everything when it comes to food businesses. But what we're finding now is that, this is a great thing that's happened over the last 5 years or so. Is brands like Pizza Hut, for example, is a great example. Across all of North America, they've been slowly closing their dine-in facilities. They've been converting them into delivery takeout because the delivery part of their business suddenly became more than 50%. So when you wake up and you have a 10,000 square foot restaurant and half of your business goes out the door because people are doing takeout and delivery, what's the point in having such a huge overhead? So they've slowly been closing those. One of the questions we talked about online was, multi-brand franchising, having not putting all your eggs into one basket as a franchisee. In some countries that might work. What's happening here is the multi-brand franchisors don't want that anymore. So they've been decoupling. So for example, you've always used to see KFC and Taco Bell, for example. They're not together anymore. They don't want you being a franchisee of both. They want you to focus on one, not on the other. Now, if you're a well-structured company, yeah, you can handle multi-brands. when we worked in Dubai, you know, there were companies there that had 50, 60, 70, 80 brands. And I have no idea how they managed to juggle them. I don't know how they made their decisions on where to put them in. And then all of a sudden, somebody would spend $1 million on a master franchise and put it in the shelf because they don't have any time for it because they're building a hotel or they're doing this. So it used to blow me away in the Middle East, especially in Dubai and Qatar, where people had so many brands in their pockets, but there were only really a few companies who can do it properly. You know, when you're in India, you look at those big companies, the big conglomerate, they can do it. They know how to get into every market. And, you know, in the Middle East, there are certain companies who can get into every market. They know what they're doing. They have access. They've got the contacts. So when we, you know, when we used to do master franchise deals, the companies overseas would say, well, what access do you have to locations? And it would always be, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry. We got everything. And if we can't find spaces, we'll build them all, right? You know, we'll build them all and we'll put all the brands in one place, right? And it's like, okay, now, you know, here, a lot of the brands I've worked with, they have very strict rules on competitive brands, very strict. So I used to get a list from Yum Brands regularly. I'm not giving away any secrets or anything, but they used to give me a list of brands that when potential franchisees inquire about any of their brands, these are if they work with any of these brands, they are disqualified immediately from the get-go. So at one point that even included Subway. So they were like, if a Subway franchisee comes along and says they want to diversify into a Pizza Hut, not happening. And obviously I argued the case at the time saying, well, that's all of your people. You know, it's like 80% of people who are owning a Subway or similar brands, they want to diversify. They want a pizza brand. They love you. You can't turn them away. And they're not really competing with you. They are because it's, you know, it's quick service, it's whatever. But in the scheme of things, it's much better to have operators who know what they're doing, who have experience, who have the money, who have the capital, who have all of that going for them. Because so many brands take on franchisees who have no experience. They don't really know what they're doing. They don't train them properly. They don't have the right amount of money. And what I do find is the majority of brands in Canada are quite strict with the criteria for financial qualification, for background, for everything. So, you know, a typical franchisor here, of course, you know, they'll do a background check. So you've got to come up with a clean criminal record. You have to come up with a good credit score. You have to come up with the money. And they're not allowing borrowed money in most cases. So if they're asking for cash and net worth, liquid assets and net worth, they can't be the same thing. They can't be borrowed, because what's happened in Canada in the last 7 years is the growth in the real estate market here has been almost like nowhere else in the world in terms of the development. So, you know, a great example is the town where I live just north of Toronto. You know, when we first came here 11 years ago, you could buy a 4-bedroom house for 200 grand. Now it's 1.5 million. Now, can you imagine that over a short period of time? So suddenly people have got tons of equity in their homes. They've got lots of buying power. So people are actually buying franchises by taking a line of credit from their mortgage, because it's cheaper than going and getting a traditional loan from the bank. They can just take the money. It's much cheaper. But again, it's that house of cards scenario where you put everything on the line, including your home, you got problems. But the franchise companies don't like using borrowed money, you know, for putting down payments and stuff. The banks don't like it. But, you know, there's a non-ending list of people who are really well capitalized over here. And we're seeing those, whether they're coming in fresh to the country or whether they've been here working. I'm always amazed at how people can save money. You know, somebody will say, I've been a taxi driver for 10 years, but I've got $1 million in the bank. And it's like, you know, who have you been carrying around? You know, but, you know, literally there's, it's strict criteria over here. And I'm glad that there is, because hopefully that reduces the rate of attrition of failure for those businesses, especially the franchise side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in India, that's what we've now shifted. You know, we are all talking about sustainability of the networks, and sustainability of the networks would only come I would say in two sense, starting with the selection of a franchisee, which is very important. And I think a lot of times that the franchise brands themselves are not so developed, and they've not really spent effort in putting systems and processes, capabilities, and they put the entire network on risk. So that's something which is happening. And even for overseas branding, I mean, this is one of the areas we'd like to touch upon. And you've seen, we talk about the poor performance of the franchisee, but we somehow miss out this poor understanding and ability of these brand owners. And you brought in a lot of from North America to Middle East. And I have seen these companies have absolutely no idea why they wouldn't. They walked into hotels in Dubai and they waited for the first check to be coming out and pick up the check and run. And there is no ability to sport and understand how the business runs.
I find even between Canada and America, there's a vast difference in everything. I mean, Tim Hortons is one of the big. It's an iconic brand in Canada. It's the biggest brand. When you open up brand in the dictionary, there's a picture of Tim Hortons there. It's like, but when they ventured into the US, even though they have more than 1,000 locations in America, they also shuttered probably 800 at the same time because they just couldn't quite get over the cultural barriers between the US and Canada. Now, I remember being at the IFA convention, and there was somebody there talking about international markets and where American brands should be going. And they did a list of all the countries where we probably know who that person is, but we won't say. And Canada was way down the list. Like it was like at number 30. And I'm going, hang on a second. So you're telling American brands that going to Canada is so difficult when they speak the same language, share the same supply chain, distribution companies, they have legislation in place. The franchise regulation is actually much softer than it is in the US. It's cheaper. There's a huge manpower. There's experience. There's entrepreneurs. They spend money on franchising. It should be at the top of your list, always. But there are differences. So American brands come into Canada. In fact, half of those brands mentioned at the beginning here are American brands in Canada. So roughly half of the market are, they're American brands, and the rest are homegrown. We're helping to produce more homegrown brands, every year, which is good. But there are differences. So one of the jobs that we take very seriously as a consultancy is helping them to make that change, that jump, localization, whatever you want to call it. So there are some brands that are sophisticated in one market, but would be seen as less sophisticated in another. There are some that are, it depends on the viewpoint of the consumer. If it's a coffee brand, do I want that coffee brand to be originating from X country when it's not associated with coffee? Or should I be taking a Singaporean pizza company seriously in Italy or in America? Who knows? So there's all these different things that you have to do. And a lot of brands, they talk about localization and customization of concepts, but they don't really do it. Even within Canada, you have to localize your products. If you're opening in Ontario compared to Quebec, for example, there's a different market. It's a different taste. It's different. It's actually a different set of people. So you have to do things differently. And a lot of people shy away from that. But you'll get a lot of international brands who will look at Canada and say, hey, that's a good market for us. Let's do it. And they won't do any pilot operations. They won't even get really involved. They'll expect people on the ground here to do all the running until they find. And they also look for a master franchisee to cover a country that is enormous. Yep. I don't think people quite understand the size, right? So it's a little bit like there are very few companies in India who can take one brand and operate it throughout the whole country. Like, you could probably count them on one hand who can really do it properly. And that's the same in Canada. There are only a few brands who can really do that with an international brand coming in. So obviously, we recommend a lot of things to people in terms of regionalization, looking for different partners in different marketplaces. And it's the only way to go 9 times out of 10, because and then there are test markets in Canada, because there are some provinces where franchise law and legislation is not the same as it is in others. I mean, up until very short time ago, British Columbia, for example, Vancouver, that whole West Coast, they didn't even have franchise law. So a lot of American companies would use that area as a test ground. knowing that if they can get the concept right over there, they can then bring it to the larger markets over here, into Toronto and Montreal, for example. But also knowing that if things go wrong, it's not going to affect the entire country. But that's changed now. So most provinces now have fairly set standard franchise regulation, which is something that international brands perhaps need to know about a little bit more too. You need disclosure documents, you need proper agreements, they need to follow a certain, it's all laid out. It's straightforward, but companies need to be aware of it. You just can't come into the market and hope for the best. You need to be armed, you need to pay someone to get all this ready for you, because if you don't, you put yourself at a very, very major disadvantage as an international brand if you're not prepared for the market entry. And I know that's common sense because it's the same for any brand. Going into India, as you can't just show up and just say, hey, I'm here, let's get on with it. There's a lot of things to take into consideration. That's how we make our money, by helping people to make that leap. And it's a big leap for some people, even from the UK to here or from America to here. Sometimes it's a gigantic leap because, Canadians take time to trust other brands, other people. Once you're on board, everything is good, but you need to build your reputation and your brand.
What kind of brands? I mean, are there some brands that you would want to speak about which are potentially of interest for overseas expansion, especially India?
Well, I won't talk about anyone in particular because I don't want to speak on their behalf right now. Look, when I first came to Canada, one of the reasons we came to Canada was because there was, at that time, rightly or wrongly, whether I was right or wrong, I always saw there was a gap in the market for international advisory services. Because we were coming to Canada for many years, we had a lot of people asking about Canadian brands in the Middle East, for example. So we'd come here regularly, and we'd talk to people, and for whatever, Second Cup Coffee is the most international brand coming out of Canada in the franchise world, and people don't even know it here. They just see it as a brand that's in Canada. They don't realize they're in 29 countries. They don't know that they've been in the Middle East for 25 years. They just don't know because, we're here, they're over there. So I saw this gap in the market over here for helping companies to go international. I'm a member of 2 international groups, I suppose, like, consortium or whatever you want to call them. We're all in the same groups, right? So, we all help each other. So if we have a brand here that wants to go to India, I know who to talk to, right, guys? So, that's how it should work, because your market, I know mine, we help each other, and the brand benefits from all of that knowledge and experience. But what I found very quickly early on was there's a lot of reluctance for international growth out of Canada. People talk about it, but there was no real backing from maybe the Franchise Association wasn't quite sure what to do at that time. I think now they're much stronger about that. Brands didn't know where to go. They didn't know how to really do it without just Googling and hoping for the best. So, we created a platform for people to be able to take their brand international and also coming in. So I'm interested in having conversations with Indian brands that are sophisticated, that want to enter this marketplace, that have something to offer, whose concepts are universally accepted or are on a very tight and strong growth curve because they've just hit the pulse at that time. So it's very easy to be a brand that's growing fast, but I like to work with companies that really know what they're doing, and I'm sure the people that you guys work with are the same. It's there are so many people out there who just franchise and then they only open 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 franchisees, and then they don't go anywhere. They stay where they are, and then they're happy. Some people are happy, but they don't. So, in terms of people coming into Canada, I think Canada is a multi-ethnic country. There are demands for all different types of food companies. I mean, there's always going to be that demand for restaurants and hospitality and everything else. That's never going to change. And we're constantly looking for new products. So there's always going to be that opportunity out there. The services industry here is large. It's dominated, I would say, by American service companies. Whether it's automotive or those types of concepts. yes, there's opportunity, but there's a lot of strong competition. With food, it's always about what's the next thing, what's the next good thing, what's the next trend, so there's always medium-term opportunity in the food business. Education for sure. There's demand in Canada for supplemental education. Because Canada is such a large immigrant population, there are always people who want their kids to do better and get better qualifications, better jobs, get ahead of everybody else. So that's something that the Middle East was like for a long time. They want their kids to do the best, so they'll send them to the best places. But what we have here is we have a lot of, we have a strong education system, but there's a demand for additional child services. The senior population is growing in Canada, so there's always going to be anything senior related is going to be popular here moving forward. No one has really been able to grasp that market fully, like 100%. No one's really been able to say, hey, this is, I had an idea for a restaurant that's only for old people, and on the surface you can make fun of it and you can laugh, but there's a market for it because people don't, there are so many ways that you can service that market, but no one's been able to really grasp the true potential of that senior care, senior services market, delivering meals, all of that. So that's an area for sure that we'd be on the lookout. Yes, fitness in the long term, not in the short term, but definitely in the medium term, long term. So we're looking, and again, technology-based companies. We're looking for people who drive their business through AI, through smart technology, everything. It doesn't matter what it is. So a lot of the companies that provide apps for your phone, they're doing very well. They've always done well in the last few years. So we're looking at those types of companies as well. And also brands that don't cost the earth. People who have their head screwed on in terms of investment levels, because there's a lot of trust to be built with foreign brands coming in. So, and yeah, there are brands in Canada who for sure want to go overseas, and but they want to do it carefully. I actually worked. I did some consulting with a very old brand in Canada. It wasn't food; it was in the service industry, and they wanted to go to India because they got approached by somebody in India, and they're like a clinic, like a weight loss clinic, and they were very nervous. They didn't know because the guy who was in India was sending them pictures of buildings where they wanted to have the clinics in, and the buildings looked old. And he goes, are these the right types of buildings for us to be in? And I said, look, don't worry about the outside. What's on the inside, right? And who lives in the area? And, how much money do people have? And et cetera, et cetera. So they had a lot of misconception. So that's one area that, people don't understand the marketplace. They just don't. So they were scared. Somebody approached them, offering them a lot of money to open their brand in India. And they ultimately said no, because they just didn't know what to do. They were scared of the marketplace. They didn't know if they could, and intellectual property came into it as well. So, so there are a lot of those companies out there who have the desire, but they need way more assistance.
That's what, international consultants do, because franchising is, and Gaurav, you could also add there, most of the international, while it looks like a global business, but it's a local business, and local insights from international consultants is where a lot of collaboration, a lot of insights actually come from.
Yeah, they also don't want to pay to do that either. That's part of the problem. You want to grow throughout the world. I've got a good friend in the US who, as soon as somebody wants to grow internationally, he just hits them with a giant bill, big invoice, and said, if you can pay that, I'll help you. If you can't, we can't do it because it's going to cost money. You can't just show up and say, hey, So brands have to be aware of that. They have to be aware of all the localization, all the laws, but also they got to be prepared to spend a little bit of money to get the right advice. If like I said, if I have a brand who wants to go to India, I know who to call, right? We know who to call. Same in Dubai, same in UK, everywhere else. But brands have to be prepared. The franchisors have to be really serious about it. And most people are not serious because they get a few inquiries online and they think that everybody in Saudi Arabia wants a piece of the action, and really it's just somebody, on a website somewhere who's pressing a button. So yeah, so the international side of it really is where the growth market is right now, because, and also some markets saturate and they want to develop outside of those markets. that's where the Middle East used to do very well. Used to have saturated brands from America looking for new markets internationally, and they work very well in most cases. But yeah, so definitely, we're definitely interested in some Indian brands that are well structured to come over here, and we'll talk about it.
I can tell you with now this changing structure, you will see a lot of Indian, not many. I mean, I'll be wrong and overcommitting myself, but there's generally some Indian brands which are there in the market, which can go global. You know, so these are brands which are in personal care, all natural, top packaging, invested by companies like Estee Lauder and likes of them. So there's a really huge capability working with a brand which is a top class leather product company, pure leather products, great manufacturing. They've been manufacturing for all the world's best brands. They're looking for it. We just had one client in women ethnic wear, not very ethnic Indian wear, and they just have a store in Toronto, this brand called Biba, one of our clients. So a lot of Indians now actually are strategically thinking rather than opportunists, right? I mean, buy because they was just on a holiday and friend met them and said, look, why don't we open up a store here? That's how some of the companies really expanded. But now they're more than happy to really reach out to you and because we know you the most credible advisory firm run and most importantly, a lot of consultants in North America, and I tell this openly because I had opportunity to work with most of them. They have never traveled. They don't understand what they're doing. So there are very few people like you who are actually have lived in all the worlds and seen and traveled and understood cultures and relationships. And
it's nice of you to say that because I kind of agree, but it's look. I remember going to Franchiseindia in Delhi years ago, and I was just like, you have to go. Right? You need to know you need to be there and smell it and taste it and all of those things. But every market's different. But traveling and it's become a hindrance because I can't travel now without noticing franchise companies and things in every country and how people are operating or have the desire to go and walk up to somebody and say, hey, have you thought about franchising your business? Because it's great. But yes, the travel part of it, the international part of it, understanding. It helps me quite a bit here because I can, when I talk to, an example, if we talk to some people who are from India, by their surname, I can tell where they're from. And then also sometimes the way they speak, I can tell which part of where they came from in the first place. So I'm happy asking people and talking about that. A lot of people don't like to talk about backgrounds and stuff like that. And they don't think it's very politically correct, but I think it's fascinating because, we're all from somewhere, and it's nice. People like to work with people who understand where they're coming from. I can say, well, I've been there. It's like a travel agency. I mean, do you trust a travel agent who has traveled or one who just sit behind a desk all their lives? So it's how it is. So if someone can tell me what something looks like because they stood there and watched it, I'm going to be very interested in working with them for sure. But thank you for saying that. And to the benefit of those brokers or consultants you've worked with, you've got to think if you're in America, for example, it's such a vast country and such a huge franchise market, you almost don't even need to leave the country. It's a little bit like vacationing. You don't need to leave the country because it's so vast and has so many fantastic areas. You don't really need to go anywhere else. So the business, when I talk with brands sometimes, there are some brands who are very small in America, but they're big internationally because the owners are travelers and they want to be everywhere. And then there are other brands who are in one state and they don't want to be anywhere else. They haven't even thought about it yet. And other brands are 10 years ahead of them. We worked with a pizza brand once who wanted to go to the Middle East, and they were only in one city in Oregon or something like that. And their competitors were freaking out because these guys were entering into 6 countries in the Middle East. And they had no idea that they could even do that at that time, right? So, experience definitely helps. And to be honest, if we don't know what to do, then we know somebody who does, right? So you always got to say, look, you're coming into a network of people. It's not, don't just take my word for it. We put you in touch with the right people. The same way we would do if somebody needed good legal advice, we put them in touch with the right lawyer, or the right accountant, or the right marketing company, or the right real estate broker, or someone like that. So, yeah, definitely.
There are a lot of questions which are coming. I'll take a few of them.
I just noticed them.
Gareth mentioned about service businesses. So we've got, Hasnur Rahman Chaudhary, who's wanting to know if, what kind of service businesses are emerging.
Well, I mean, it's kind of what we said before. It's people who are associating with dedicated markets, whether it's senior care, whether it's child education services. These days, it's becoming more specific. So in the past, you'd have automotive services, but that's now being broken down into different sectors. So there's a lot of specialization when it comes to the service industry. People are, I mean, you don't have necessarily the same problem as we do, but we work with a client who, in a lot of places in Canada, people change their tires on their car in the winter. They put on winter tires, which have a different tread, and it's better in the snow and the ice. And we work with a brand who, they just come to your driveway in your house and change the tires for you. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to worry about anything. It's a very simple service, but they're very, very successful. And during the coronavirus, boom, right? It's because they don't have to touch anything. They don't have to come to your house. They don't have to come inside. You don't need to be with them. So the specialized service industries are becoming more and more important in this marketplace, for sure.
You have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so sir, so you're asking me?
Yeah, service businesses.
All sectors, as I said, I think both business to business, business to consumer, so even business to consumer services, a lot of direct to home services are almost in the world. One of the greatest demand in business is direct to home. One of the areas which I will certainly reach out to, was there is a huge demand of elder care in India also. And this time the payment for elder care would come from, say, Canada, but they would like to pay for their parents being available in India and so on. So there's a huge demand. There's not much been done in that space. There is a lot of demand for people asking us that they want to invest into that, because especially after this, if you had your elders back home and they're not being looked after and you didn't have a right kind of care, you're most worried. And this is something which is a very big opportunity coming up. So I'll reach out to you independently and we can have a discussion on that. But that's many services like that. But you need credibility. You need a lot of training plays a very important role in service businesses and companies which are long-term players. They might look like doing a very simple thing, but they invest a lot on training. From outside, it looks very simple, but it has a very deep-rooted training and capability development within.
Yeah. Really but the conversation itself is taking time. We've run out of time, but we'll extend it by 5 minutes. But
sure.
And please continue to put your questions. We'll try and reach out to Gareth and Gaurav and see if we can answer them offline. But Gareth, you were saying something.
Yeah, I was just saying. Actually, I forgot what I was going to say. It was something Gaurav brought up there, and I'm just looking at some of those. Yeah, sorry, it just flashed through my mind. Yeah, somebody had said. For franchise companies that are making a shift arrangement they're changing they're reworking their franchise models to meet the pandemic challenges. Is this a big risk for small time investors, knowing, how things are? I'm assuming they're sort of asking, listen, if we change everything and then we change everything back, is there money? And yes, of course, if companies want to survive and they change, I mean, we're using that word pivot all the time. You're moving your business from here to here. Companies that were making alcohol before are now making hand sanitizer. There are things like that going on. But they're all short-term. They're all very short-term things. As soon as things are back to whatever the new normal is going to be, the barriers will come down. The restrictions will start slowly easing. I don't think franchise companies have made that much of a change. In actual fact, there are going to be benefits, because right now, there are franchise companies who are suffering, franchisees that are suffering because of using third-party delivery companies that are charging a lot of money. So the third-party delivery industry was growing. It's still growing, it's growing like crazy. And the COVID-19 pandemic has been huge for them. Overnight, almost their business has quadrupled. They still can't make any money from it, which is, I don't know why that's happening, but you're already seeing consolidation. Seeing Just Eat just bought Grubhub and these people, but it's expensive. So, when you're paying 25-30% fees out of your menu and you don't want to put your prices up because you become uncompetitive, I don't know many food brands that are making 30% margin, right? So a lot of people are operating at a loss when you use a third-party delivery company, but they need, I've asked companies why you do that. And they're like, well, we have to. If we're not on Uber Eats or something, then we're losing out on business. And there's enough business to go around. But that will change. I think there's going to be more. It went away from in-house delivery to external, and I think that's going to change again afterwards when the demand is not as high. But the new normal for sure is going to be a lot more contactless interactions, a lot more sterile. I call it boring interactions, social distancing. I think that's going to be around for quite a while. But I think the overall effect for some brands is, I don't think it's going to have a gigantic effect on them moving forward. They'll be able to shift their business back to consumer-driven demand at any given time. It just takes a little while sometimes.
So please continue to leave if you want to expand your business, you can write E, and if you want to buy a franchise, you can write B, so that we know what's your interest here. Some last remarks from Gaurav and Gareth, because we've run out of time, but it's been a fantastic conversation. So before we close, some last remarks from Gaurav.
Also, you can add, Sachin, that if you are looking to expand, you write E, and if you are looking to buy a business, that's what you said, B?
B for buying a business.
If you want to go international, write I. So
I.
That's also interesting. So we can get another person. If anybody wants to go international, you obviously can reach.
Absolutely. There's somebody who's wanting to know that there's a luxury brand which they want to expand to UAE or Canada. There's somebody who's asking for legal fees. So I'm going to reach out to Gareth and connect with those.
Sorry, what are they asking for? Legal fees?
Legal fees. What is the kind of estimated legal fee strategy fee?
Okay, look, if they're coming to Canada and they are a franchise brand, it's not just about the fees. It's the legal structure they have to put in place. So to operate legally and soundly and properly in Canada, the companies need to have what's called a franchise disclosure document, which is traditionally done by a lawyer. And what happens over here is lawyers will do like a package for people, whether they're in the country or they're new brands coming in. They'll put together a franchise disclosure document, an appropriate franchise agreement, and any other documents that are required for that type of business. And the price range, so you need to have that in place. So me as a broker, I wouldn't work with a company that wasn't set up properly, because as soon as you generate interest from prospective franchisees, that's not the time to go and do it, because it can take months. So you got to be prepared at the beginning. You got to have your documents ready, because people here will ask you on day one, where's your documents? It's like, show me the structure, show me that you've invested into the brand and you're not fly by night. So, but lawyers will do it in a way where they'll take part of your existing structure and history and background of your company and finances and all those things, and they'll package it in a way that makes sense for the Canadian market, because it has big repercussions down the line if you don't do it. So the fees for a franchisor, just putting together a franchise package of basic documents, bearing in mind some lawyers may give you advice on structuring your franchise in Canada as well. So there may well be some consulting advice, and companies like ours for sure would give you that consulting advice. But basic legal packages would range from the $10,000 to the $40,000 mark. There's a big wide range depending on who you engage with. Some of the top law firms will charge a lot of money. You may well get what you pay for, but there are a few lawyers I work with who charge at the lower end, but who put together solid franchise documents for you. And then beyond that, you know, you need a lawyer to transact each franchise agreement, to put the franchise agreement together each time. It's a few thousand each time you do that. So, and again, it all depends. Building a good relationship with a good consultant and lawyer first pays off big time down the line for any brand looking to do it. So, you know, I'm not going to give an overall number for everybody, but you know, those are the sort of ballparks. I'd say like $15,000 to do a franchise package is reasonable to get you. And also in Canada, you don't need to register your franchise documents either. In America, you have to file them with each state, and that costs money and takes time. In Canada, once your documents are ready and they are considered legal, you're ready to go. There are other things you need to do as an international company. You may want to incorporate locally. You may need to make yourself aware of the taxation system and withholding taxes. There's a lot to be considered, okay? And most lawyers or consultants would point them in the right direction, that's for sure.
Sure, thank you. Any closing remarks, Gaurav, and when we wrap up here already?
It's been a great session. I think always great learning from you, Gareth. I think we need to do more often and maybe do a special session on overview on if you want to took opportunities to Canada.
Sure.
A lot of interest there. I can also tell you that India sends over 250,000. We are now the largest in the world to send students to Canada. So 250,000 students only last year. We overtaken China in this regard, and we've taken on COVID count also. But
yeah, but a lot of those students remain, right? A lot of those students remain in Canada afterwards because they can get legal status for the time they spent in school here, so they can become permanent residents very quickly through that channel. So that helps a lot of people.
So we are getting a lot of requests now with their parents, and I think while they study there or they're already there, they don't want to bring them back. But obviously, job markets are not that easy. You cannot absorb 250,000 every year.
No.
And the kind of jobs they want to do, because they come from obviously rich backgrounds and they have money and so on. So they are all looking to invest. So we want to do sometime sooner, which I think we would like to put across, where it's purely an opportunity Canada. If you're looking to do that, from helping you to understand the market, understand your permanent or investment phase, you know, how you migrate to that market and selecting the right business. If all that can be done, it's a tremendous service and a great opportunity.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I'd be interested in doing that for sure. So we can talk about that later on. And there are very specific programs, right? So it can be streamlined very effectively.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's a good next step. So thank you, man. Thank you, everyone. I know it's late here, but it's been
I don't know what time it is there.
Gareth, have a great day. Yeah, it's very early for you.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. And if anyone has anything, just any questions, they can send them to me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Thank you very much.
No problem.